one out of every two salespeople don't follow up with a prospect more than once.
I love winning. I hate
Yeah.
losing. I want to go out. I want to win. I don't want to miss my goals. I want to hit every goal that I set for myself.
In order for somebody to buy, typically, we need to identify 4 pain points. In order to identify those 4 pain points, then we need to ask at least 12 questions. Meaning that we need to be asking a lot of questions in order to find what our potential prospects are really needing.
The more that somebody is willing to put up to invest in themselves, the better the return that they're going to get.
I mean, I think Henry Ford said, like, whatever you believe is true, right? So if you believe you can do it, you're right. If you don't believe you can do it, you're right. So figuring out those things that kind of shake your world up a little bit can really help you get to that next level.
Got a pretty eclectic background in sales. I mean, it's been stable for the last 20 years because I've been in this industry.
You don't have to be the absolute, best at everything, best at closing. I mean, you can always learn to close better, learn better product knowledge, get better systems in place for follow-up and those kind of things. But if you aren't showing up, if you set an appointment, you don't show up to it, or you cancel for whatever reason, or you're always rescheduling, I mean, that's probably the biggest problem.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Power Producers Podcast, where we are refining and redefining the sales game. Today, we're going to bring you somebody from outside of our industry that does have quite a bit of sales experience. As he describes it, eclectic. His name is Jacob Hicks, and he works with salespeople and entrepreneurs in his coaching environment every single day. And if you've listened to this show for any length of time, you know we like to get perspectives from all kinds of people who sell all kinds or have sold all kinds of things, because we might be able to get 1 or 2 nuggets or tricks that we don't know or use currently in our game that will only make us stronger. So Jacob, welcome, man. You got a blank canvas today.
Thank you so much for having me, man. Thanks for that intro. That was great.
Absolutely. So before we get cranked up and start talking, all things sales and entrepreneurship, why don't you give everybody a little bit of your background so they know where you're coming from?
Yeah, so I've been in sales for pretty much all of my working life. As you said, pretty eclectic background. I came up selling suits, and that was, well, there was good and bad in retail, as everybody knows. But it was a really great way to cut my teeth, figure out, the sales processes, just how kind of the basics work. From there, I did real estate for a little while during COVID, which was as hard as you'd probably imagine it was. And then most recently, I was an outside sales rep for a couple of different companies in the optical world. So traveling around selling various things around eyeglasses.
Interesting. So my career started in retail. I worked in retail from the time I was 14 years old until I finally decided I was sick of working 100 hours a week.
Yeah, for $40.
Yeah, my 2-year-old didn't know who I was because I didn't get fourth quarter off and I didn't get weekends off. But I ran grocery stores and super targets. But as far as sales go, my God, man, I've been selling since I was old enough to talk, I believe, whether it's selling my parents on something I wanted or wanted to do, or actually going door to door in the neighborhood. I was one of the only kids that didn't hate the fundraisers, because to me, it was a challenge to go out and see what I could create. And I've written a couple of books and I talk about it in my first book, but one of my first real, 2 of my first real sales jobs, I wouldn't say jobs, sales experiences were, we had I don't know, you may or may not know what this is. Have you ever heard of an Osage orange?
No.
Okay, so it's not something that's edible. It's like actually, it's like a fruit tree, but if you've ever had fruit trees in your yard, it's kind of nice to have the fruit, but they make a horrible mess. And Osage oranges do that, but you can't eat them. But it looks, best way to describe it, it looks like a spherical brain, and it smells like an orange. Some people call them monkey balls, but they're about the size of a softball. And the lady across the street from us, when I lived outside of Pittsburgh in Pennsylvania, had a tree in her yard, and she absolutely hated the fact that it made such a mess. So she would have me come over, clean it up, and pay me to do that and throw them away. Except for one day, I took one in to show and tell when I was in 2nd or 3rd grade. And everybody went nuts over it. They'd never seen one before. They didn't have that tree in their yard. They loved the fact it smelled like an orange, and they wanted one. So The next time I went over to clean up her yard, I said, "Hey, you mind if I just take these home? I want to do something with them." And she's like, "I don't care. I just want them out of here." So I decided it would be a good idea for me to take them to school and operate an Osage orange operation out of my backpack. And I filled it up and I started selling them to kids for $1 a piece until I found out that the principal of the school did not believe in a free market economy when you're in elementary school, and I got shut down. And after that, we moved to Birmingham, Alabama. And when I lived in Birmingham, I found out pretty quickly that anywhere you go, you're asked two questions, and not necessarily in this order. The first one is where do you go to church, and the second one is Alabama or Auburn. Which one? And you have to answer both if you want to fit in socially. And so I realized, I grew up in a home where my mom did a lot of crafts, and we spent a lot of time in craft stores and everything else. And one time she had bought me a loom to weave potholders with these little things that were like fabric rubber bands. And I figured out that if I did half of them as Alabama and half of them as Auburn, I could come home from school every day and knock out 5 or 6 of them and go door to door and sell them for $1 a piece. And I knew that if I had both, I would be able to sell at least one to the people who were there, because who's not going to take a potholder from an innocent elementary school kid who's got the guts to go out and knock on your door and ask? And so from that point on, the rest is history, man. I mean, like you, I've got a pretty eclectic background in sales. I mean, it's been stable for the last 20 years because I've been in this industry, but I've also sold, I sold retail on the floor in sporting goods stores. I sold outside to different teams if we needed to like outfit their uniforms and everything else. And I also sold, probably one of my favorite jobs was selling satellite dishes door to door in West Virginia, where 65% of the state didn't have cable at the time. So it's like, not the only challenge was getting people's credit approved to get them to be able to put it on a monthly payment, but selling the dish was the easy part. And I'm not talking about direct TV, because it didn't even get invented until shortly before I left that industry. I was selling the big 6.5-foot C-band satellite dishes that you don't really even see anywhere anymore. So lots of experience, lots of different buyers. I'm a huge fan of buyer's journey and buyer's experience. And I'm interested in how much that's transformed over the course of the last few years. And by few years, I mean decade or more, where things have gone more and more digital. So, of your experience in sales, let's just get into it, man. What do you think makes the best salespeople who they are?
So the truth is, I think, like honestly, I think the best salespeople are the people that are committed to whatever system they have built, particularly around follow-up. I have seen stats that say most salespeople, gosh, it's almost upsetting to say, but 1 out of every 2 salespeople don't follow up with a prospect more than once.
I
And
would agree with that, man. I can
yeah,
tell you that, I mean, quick math validates that in my industry.
yeah, which I mean, like that's, I mean, again, kind of broad strokes here, but I mean, everybody has seen that. And if you've been in sales for more than 2 minutes, you see that a lot of the time. And it's just so interesting to me, like how low the bar is, where if you are selling, like a $50 shirt, or if you are selling, something for hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars, it all kind of comes down to similar things, and that's just staying in front of your prospects and staying in front of your general clientele, and either a like automated follow-up system for what I kind of consider like a lower tier, or like very personalized follow-up. But still, I mean, as long as you're doing it consistently, you're winning. And I think that's really what separates people out from the sales folks.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think follow-up is key in pretty much anything and everything in life. And
Yep.
sadly, you're right. The bar is set very low. I got recruited into the insurance industry out of retail. And what got me to make the decision to jump in was that I had a guy tell me that it's an average industry. It's full of C
Mm,
players. It's full of people
yep.
who do just enough. You can make really
Hmm.
good money by doing just enough, but they don't really do more. They don't really do less. And if you feel like you're an A player, go compete against a bunch of C's. My response to him was, I'd rather compete against A's because that's what's going to make me better. But I
Yep.
understand what you're saying. Ultimately, I could do very well. And you know what? I got into the industry and he was 100% right. It blows my mind how much is just left on the table from people who don't have systems in place to follow up. And even if they
Hmm.
do have a CRM, they're not putting their leads into the CRM and getting it
Yep.
into the automation sequences to follow up via email or text, or even setting tasks and reminders to themselves, or if it does set tasks and reminders, that they're just so immune to them constantly reminding them that they just ignore them and don't follow through. So
Yep.
how do you get out of that trap? I mean, if you're somebody who can sit here and listen, people, if it's an average industry, I know 50% of you guys suck at this that are listening right now. So my question is, if I'm bad at follow up, how do I fix it?
So, I mean, you kind of hit the nail on the head, honestly. Like having a CRM that you aren't utilizing, whether putting in your prospects, putting your notes, feeding people into your automations, if you're not using that, then why are you even bothering? Really, the truth is that everybody out there has a follow-up system. Everybody, regardless of if they're an A+ player, top 1% of 1%, or if they are the other 99%. And sometimes your systems, like we were talking about before, they can be really, really solid and keep funneling business into your bottom line, or they can suck and you don't follow up more than once. That's your system, right? So in terms of getting out of it, you have to really understand what it is you're driving towards. And I feel like we've kind of talked around this a little bit already, where like this, like you said, like the average, a lot of industries and sales can be just like you said, they can be average players, right? Where you can be an average player, you can make a decent living. You don't have to, you're not looking to get, 6 figures or 7 figures or make President's Club or whatever else. So really what you have to understand is why you're doing what you're doing. So if you are a salesperson, then why, like, I mean, what is incentivizing you to really push harder? Because at some point we all get comfortable, right? Where maybe we're making low 6 figures or whatever. That's more money than we've ever made before. That gives us a great living where we can go out and, buy nice things and take people out to dinner and whatever else we want to be doing. But if you don't understand why, like, and I'm not talking about like, hey, I didn't follow up with somebody. Why did I do that? I'm talking about a bigger picture purpose here, where like, what is the real driving factor for you? So if it's like, let's say it's your family, you want to give a better life to your family. So really sit down and figure out what that would do for you. So if you are let's say you're at the low 6 figures, like we said before, what would it do for you and your family if you got to, 200K, 300K, 500K? What would that really do for you and your family? And sit down and actually pencil it out, and that will help drive you forward and get you past some of these roadblocks that people can run into, particularly around follow-up.
Yeah, I mean, I put a tweet out this week actually that says we earn in the denominations in which we think. Stop trying to
Yep.
make $100,000 a year and start trying to make $100,000 a month.
Yep.
And I mean, I think so much of what we do in the sales game, it has to do with self-belief and letting
Yeah.
garbage live rent-free in our heads.
Yes.
We've got to clear that stuff out, man. If you truly believe that you could go out and make $100,000 a month, and you've got a system that would allow you to do that if you put in the work and effort to do it,
Hmm.
go do it, right? I mean, most
Yep.
of the time it's our own self-belief that's limiting us from doing that. Guess what? If you ever make 100,000 a month, probably going to do it again and again
Yep.
and again. And I mean, I'm not going to get into my personal economic situation on a podcast, but I can tell you, people, I've done it, and I've done it again, and I've done it again, and I've done it again. And I didn't believe that I could. But once I finally convinced myself that I could, and I actually did that, that became the new benchmark for me,
Yep.
that's what I want to earn. And I'm not willing to settle for any less. Now, I think some of that has to do with the fabric that's woven of who we are. And
Mm.
some people are just born to go do this. And I feel like I'm one of those people. I mean, I feel like I've already told you, like, since the time I could talk, I've probably been selling, but it's more than that. It's the competitive nature of it. I love winning. I hate
Yeah.
losing. I want to go out. I want to win. I don't want to miss my goals. I want to hit every goal that I set for myself.
Hmm.
And I think a good bit of that is deeply rooted in the fact that I grew up playing sports, my entire life. That's what taught me to be competitive at an early age. That's what taught me how good it felt to win and how bad it felt to lose. And I've just translated that into the business world at this point. But I think, the other thing that if you were to ask me the same question, what do I think, salespeople do poorly? I think they missed the mark by not taking the time to identify who their ideal prospect or their
Mm.
ideal client is,
Yep.
and create that profile and then stick to it, right?
Yeah.
Because when you're in sales, depending on if you're commission only or have a recoverable draw or you have a salary with validation pressure or whatever else, you do have pressure beating down on you. And one of the hardest things to do when you're not validated and proven that you can do the job is to say no. But the reality
Mm,
is, I would tell you right now, it is more important for a newer salesperson to say no to the outside distractions than it is for me today, because I've
yep.
already done it, man. I've already got a book of income that's residual income coming in on my renewals every year and everything else. So if I get a distraction economically, it's probably not going to hurt me. Is it a waste of my time? Yeah, I could have been doing it to go make more money, but it's not going to necessarily put me in a bad situation. Where I see salespeople, specifically producers in the insurance industry, screw up is when they want to write any piece of business that gets put in
Yes.
front of them, knowing up front, man, this is going to be a real challenge. But if I work really hard and I really try and talk the underwriter into giving me terms, I think I'm going to be able to go out and quote this. And they spend all of their time doing that, and it doesn't work out. And the
Hmm.
reason it's such a big problem is not just the fact that they lost there, but they sold out to that deal that they never should have started with in the beginning, and they've robbed themselves of all the time they could have been spending prospecting inside the ideal client profile or profiles that they should be chasing.
Yeah, I absolutely love what you're saying. Because I mean, as we know, like if you're, especially if you're a newer salesperson, a lot of the time it's anybody and everybody, right? And especially if you are like you were saying before, like where you're like maybe you're a W-2 job where you've got a commission or a draw of some sort. I mean, a lot of those bigger companies, they want every dollar is a good dollar, right? And the truth is that that's not true. Now, when you first get started, like that's, I mean, you got to kind of figure things out. You might have to get burned a time or two. You're like, oh man, I don't want to work with that kind of person again.
I was going
But
to
you have,
say that too.
yeah.
To be fair to newer salespeople, when you are
Hmm.
new, I'm not saying that you're going to come out of the box and should have it all figured out. You do have to get kicked in the teeth a couple of times, but
Yeah.
once you do, stop. Stop and go back to what you should have now figured out works.
Yeah, 100%. Well, and then start figuring out like, okay, like for me personally, like I'm like I said, I'm a coach, right? And like in between sessions, I'm gonna say, hey, we're gonna like you're gonna push for 100 cold calls or whatever we're kind of driving towards, in a couple of weeks. And if somebody like says they want to do these things and they end up like, I'm not gonna commit to the process and I'm not gonna do, the homework that we agreed upon. Those are the kind of people I don't want to work with. So like just like figuring out that kind of stuff is hugely critical and people miss it all the time.
It's interesting too, because we can shift for a second and talk about coaching.
Oh, sure.
Uh, it's always interesting to me how much people are willing to invest in themselves. Okay, and
Yes.
I think we go in and we go to a job and we expect to get training and development. We expect
Hmm.
them to give us a mentor or somebody that we can look up to that's going to kind of show us the ropes. But it's always interesting to see how much people do in addition to what's handed to you. How much are you willing to give up, whether it be monetarily or in time or whatever else. And as I have scaled my online community, from nothing to what's now got, 260 some agencies and about 1,500, 1,600 producers across the country in the community, the one thing that I've noticed is the more that somebody is willing to put up to invest in themselves, the better the
Hmm.
return that they're going to get. As I have had to increase pricing over the years because my time is limited, and as I see that my time is worth more, I need to be compensated for that at the
Hmm.
level that it's worth. But at the price point that I'm at now, it is 2.5 times what it cost 4 years ago. And I
Hmm.
stayed 3 or 4 years ago, and I stayed where I was 3 or 4 years ago for a good bit because it was easy. It wasn't a difficult sale for me to make. Honestly, it made sense to the people who were coming in, but I had people in my community that were saying, David, you're giving way too much value inside of this for you to
Yeah.
charge what you charge. You need to charge more because you're going to get spread too thin and you're not going to have enough money to make it worth your while, and eventually you're going to burn out. And you know what? I pushed back for a little bit, and then finally I caved, and I'm like, you know what? Let's throw it out there and see what happens. Here's what happened, man. I actually have more people coming into my community on a regular basis at 2.5 times what I did before, because they automatically perceive it as having that much more value, right? So
Yeah.
if you listen to Alex Hermosi, that's one of the things he says. If
Yep.
you have a higher price or you are the highest, you're automatically perceived to have the most value. I happen to believe we do have the most value in addition to being perceived as that. But it was an interesting thing to see. More people, it wasn't that we just made more revenue. That's obvious because you're charging 2.5 times more, but we actually have more people coming in. But the thing that was the most interesting to me more than anything else is those people that spend 2.5 times more to come in are the best performers of the people
Yes.
that I've had over 5 or 6 years. And it doesn't mean that the people that have been in the legacy community are bad performers. It just means the people that are spending more are working harder because it was a greater sacrifice. They want to make sure that they get a return on that investment, and they end
Hmm.
up doing really, really well that way. I also realized that my old price point, even though it's not necessarily the case for me, is apparently couch cushion money for a lot of these people. And they were willing to pay what is honestly a significant amount of money to come in and then never apply themselves, never do anything. And I find myself chasing people around, and I can't want it for them more than they want it for themselves. So it's wild to think that way. But people have to be willing to do what it takes, number one, in the work side of things, but you have to be willing to do what it takes for you to invest in yourself too. Whether that be join a coaching program, read books, go to conferences and boot camps and things that are going to hone your skills. That's who I want to go to battle with every single day.
Yeah. So I love what you're saying too. I mean, like you're talking about the perceived value here. And like I've learned in my sales life that, if you're selling somebody like a $10 box of chocolates, or if you're selling somebody, a $50,000 car or whatever else, it's a higher ticket item. Usually the sale is pretty simple and it's pretty similar. But really, like those folks at the lower price point are the folks that are like, well, am I really gonna get, am I really getting
They're
what
going to
I'm
nickel
paying
and
for?
dime you, man.
Exactly, exactly. So I mean, like the folks that we're talking about that are paying these 4, 5, 6 figures sometimes for coaching are the folks that have already invested themselves at a high level and like, hey, I mean, I need somebody to hold me accountable or to help me get to that next level. I mean, I've definitely experienced that. I mean, it's so fun. Like I just had a call with a gal the other day. And she told me like, we were going through like the typical process, seeing if coaching made sense for her or not. And she told me at the end that she was just astounded at my prices and she didn't even know what the average was. And that doesn't tell me that I'm too expensive. That tells me how much she's willing to invest in herself.
Without
And
doing
if
any research. You didn't even
yeah,
invest enough to figure out what the averages were before you took the call
exactly.
with somebody.
Yep. So, I mean, it all goes. I mean, we talked about this a lot kind of already, but it all comes down to your mindset. Like if you, I mean, I think Henry Ford said like whatever you believe is true, right? So if you believe you can do it, you're right. If you don't believe you can do it, you're right. So figuring out those things that kind of shake your world up a little bit can really help you get to that next level.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because as you were talking about it, I'm rewinding and remembering, um, you being in the retail selling
Yeah.
suits, right?
Yeah.
Like, so you were at a place that I would argue, and you can correct me if I'm wrong,
Mhm.
but I mean, you weren't at Neiman Marcus,
Yep.
okay? You were selling what I would consider to be a value brand for people who need to wear suits to work or go to a wedding or a funeral or whatever else, but
Yep.
they're coming in and it's in many cases probably the first suit some people have bought, or the first several, whereas you know I buy my stuff from Tom James. They come to me.
Hmm.
Everything that I get is custom, and I imagine that you probably had people that were getting sticker shock when they came in for a suit that might be a couple of hundred, $300, $400. I don't
Yep.
even ask the price. I just know I like it. I know the quality's there, and I know that it's a reasonable value for what I'm getting. And so usually I'm not going to say I'm shocked, but it's a surprise, a very soft surprise when I find out how much something's going to be. And to be honest with you, I've studied how they sell through the lady who comes out to my office.
Mm.
and does all the things, right? And so it's a very progressive process that you can tell is ingrained in them. They're trained to do this.
Yep,
Where,
yep,
well, what do you think about this lining? I don't ask, is that lining a custom lining or is that the one that automatically comes with it? It's always the custom lining though that's going to
yeah,
cost me more. Or when we go to the buttons, it's not the buttons that are the ones that are part of the deal. Here's the buttons you can upgrade to, but it's never presented that way. Price is never discussed. It's never offered. If I asked it, it would be given to me, but the entire sales process is basically on here's what I'm going to offer to you. What do you like out of what I'm showing you? And at the end of the day, I'm building something. And if I were to look back over my average suit and what I pay, if I would
mhm,
have just gone with whatever the basic model, not the basic model of the suit, but like the lining, the upgrades, the
yep,
all of that stuff, what would the difference in cost be? And the reality is probably 25 or 30% different, you know?
hmm
And it's an interesting sales process to watch because I think that if you were to take the Men's Warehouse client and put them in front of somebody like that, it would not go over very well. The very first question, as soon as the fabric swatches came out, well, how much am I going to be paying for this? You know,
yeah,
as opposed to walking into a store and having a rough idea of what you might be spending and going from there. So it's always interesting to study buyer psychology because, you know, because we buy stuff, man. You and I both do, right?
yeah,
Like I know how I think. And you know, unfortunately, I'm in sales. Unfortunately, I'm in sales, but my mindset's always been I'm going to buy what I want when I want it. And if I need to sell more to pay for it, then I will. You know, I
yep.
mean, it's just the way that it is. Probably not the best economic model for those of you listening to this, but it's worked out okay for me to this point.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely true. And like, it really kind of comes like really what I've figured out. I'm curious to see if you've had something similar because we kind of like very similar backgrounds, like you said, where like the people at the lower end of the like the buying spectrum, whatever your industry might be, those are the folks like that they're paying for the product, right? But the higher we get, because like you say before, like the materials might even be somewhat comparable, maybe if from like these custom folks you have coming to your house. But I mean, like, really what we're paying for is the experience and the quality of the people that we're working with, right? So, like, if you're spending 10 grand on a suit, you're spending 10 grand on coaching or anything else, you're probably expecting a certain level of service and certain level of competency too, meaning that that person is probably like they're coming in, measuring you, giving you all the swatches and everything else, right? But they're also customizing that suit to fit you and tailoring it to you specifically in such a way that you're not having to go back to the store, have things redone over and over and over again.
Absolutely. So I think let's talk about this for a second because I also think this is an interesting progression. You were in inside sales, you know, selling suits,
Yep.
and most recently you were an outside salesperson in the optical industry. How did you
Yeah.
make that transition? Because it's a completely different skill set, man.
So, I mean, you're
Oh,
absolutely right.
let me reframe that. I don't think
Yeah.
it's a completely different skill set. I think that there are certain principles of sales that apply regardless of whether you're inside, outside, inbound, outbound, whatever.
Yep.
But it is still a transition, especially if you had to go out and originate your opportunities like the people in the insurance industry do. I don't know, you know, what your job was like, but I do know, you know, I have experience with some people who have had outside sales jobs where it's more like route sales, where they give you here's your route you're going to go to, and your number one goal is to get the people who are already buying from you to buy more, and also while
Mhm.
you're in the area, stop by a couple other places and see if you can get some new customers. But largely in the insurance industry, you're going out and you're taking that they're buying from somebody, but it's just not you, and you're originating everything.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're right. It was like a pretty big gap. I mean, I agree with you that there are like there's kind of like very like broad principles to every sales industry wherever you are and whatever you're selling. For me, I mean, like when I mentioned real estate before, I mean, that was kind of my first, I would say, taste of outside sales. I mean, I didn't really have the skill set at the time, like I did, towards the end of my, W-2 life. But I mean, really, like what I figured out is, I mean, follow up is absolutely key, and like really, what it comes down to is kind of the basic thing of showing up. Like you don't have to be the absolute, best at everything, best at closing. I mean, you can always learn to close better, learn better product knowledge, get better systems in place for follow up and those kind of things. But if you aren't showing up, if you set an appointment, you don't show up to it, or you cancel for whatever reason, or you're always rescheduling, I mean, that's probably the biggest problem. I mean, just showing up and doing those kind of things. And I mean, you're right, like the routing piece, like that's really, really critical in your outside sales. But I mean, show up, offer some new products or whatever, and just keep doing it until they buy, I think.
So were you calling on like doctors' offices or talk a little bit about what that was?
Yeah, so I mean, I did a couple of different things in the optical industry. So when I first started, I was selling frames, like some of your like name brand like Coach Michael Kors, that kind of thing. And then towards the end, I was selling the lens design. So yeah, I was calling on the doctors, well, the doctors themselves, and also their the opticians and the teams are surrounding them. So like on the frame side, I mean, I was carrying a bag, and I was carrying 5 bags actually. So I mean, I was lugging this stuff. They gave me a little cart that I could lug all these bags into offices, and we would show them the new line, show them the new releases, all that kind of stuff. Hopefully, again, always more, always more, always more. Selling them that kind of stuff, and then towards the end of my W-2 life, selling the design, that's when it got significantly more technical, which I preferred a lot more. So the lens design, I'm not carrying in a product to you, because the way that it works in the optical industry is if you as the patient come in, you get your eye exam, you pick out your frame, they will take that frame and whatever lens design you guys decide on and then send it to a lab that will create your glasses for them. So they are actually buying the lens from the lab that works with us, the designers. So a lot of it was a lot more like, I mean, talking through the products, of course, but then helping people make bigger business decisions, because there are, I mean, just gobs and gobs and gobs of different designs out there for lenses. So helping people usually whittle it down to your top like 3 to 5-ish kind of lens designs, and then training their teams on how to talk to them. So a lot of my, I mean, again, a lot of what I'm doing now is very similar to what I was doing then, where you're actually, teaching some folks how to sell and how to talk around a product. And it's kind of, I mean, kind of like similar to what we were talking about in retail stuff, where you might start at the high end, say, hey, this is the best, the best. The doctor recommends this. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I was going to spend this much on glasses. I was not expecting that today. He's like, okay, well, what features and what things you want to give up? And then you decide from there.
You know, it's interesting. Some of the best training I had, and part of the problem is a lot of companies just really don't have sales training at all.
Yeah. Well, and it's
Like,
like 2 weeks and like, good luck.
yeah, or good sales training. But I'm gonna give some credit here to Finish Line, because I sold when I lived here, I worked at a privately held sporting goods store that had, it also had like shoes, that tennis shoes and athletic wear and stuff
Yeah.
like that. Um, but when I moved up to West Virginia, I worked part-time at Finish Line in the mall, and they had a very um, structured training program that you were held accountable to follow. And the
Hmm.
managers would literally hover out of view and listen to you interacting with the clients or customers when they came in. And then they would give you feedback when those people left, like in real time. And I mean, that's almost, you think about what you get paid to work in a mall.
Yeah.
That's unheard of, man. But it's even
Hmm.
better training than what I've gotten in some of the outside sales stuff that I've done. And I'll never, I mean, it enough so that it still sticks with me today, right? So anytime somebody would come into Finish Line and they had a shoe in their hand, you would go up and engage with them with small talk and say, hey, would you like for me to tell you a little bit about this model? And they would say yes. And I would say, okay, well, for cushioning, and everything started with for cushioning, because they had obviously done studies and realized that most people were looking for comfort in something that had good cushioning in the shoe. And it was an easy thing to talk about, right? So for cushioning, and then you only needed to know 3 things. You needed to know if the midsole was EVA, molded EVA, or polyurethane. And they taught you how to identify which was which if you had no idea what it was. And then you would go in and say, well, this is molded EVA, and you're going to find that it's kind of a middle of the line. It's got good comfort, but it doesn't hold up well enough. The actual EVA is probably the worst. So if you think old school throwback New Balance with like that foam that's in
Sure.
between the upper and the sole, that's EVA. Molded EVA is a little more cushiony. Polyurethane is what's in the Air Max. And the polyurethane is the most cushion, the most durability and everything. And so you would say, well, so for cushioning, this has this, and it's going to break down in a certain amount of time. What do you intend on using the shoes for? And they would say, oh, I'm going to do aerobics, or I'm going to go running, or I'm going to do this. Have you considered? And I mean, the whole thing was literally just an unbelievable experience of walking somebody through a buyer's journey. But the
Yeah.
thing is, when you progress in your sales career, even though I might not be talking about EVA, molded EVA, and polyurethane today, I'm still going out and providing options and educating my client on those options
Mm,
and why they're important for them. The other thing that I think was good was the feedback you would get was not to go out and vomit features and benefits. Like that's one of the biggest
yes.
issues salespeople have. And so you would say for cushioning this shoe has, but then you immediately pivot to what are you planning on doing? I mean, how often are you running a week? How many miles at a time? All of these things, and you're asking the questions to qualify. Is this recommendation going to be a good one, or am I just trying to sell them this because that's what they walked in and picked up? And you can take that and use that as part of your toolbox, no matter what the product is that you're selling at this point. Even in the
Yeah.
coaching game, man. Hey, I've got a couple of different options. What's your end game? What's your goal? How much do you want to increase your sales by every year? How much do you want the value of your agency to be worth? How many
Mhm.
producers do you plan on adding and scaling? How quickly do you plan on doing that? Those are all things that you have to know to say, this is the best value for you, in my opinion, or this is the best value, but ultimately it's going to be up to you.
Yeah, most I love what you're saying too. I mean, I've got to do a shout out too. I mean, Men's Warehouse had a very, very similar process where like somebody walked in the door and they started looking around a little bit. We'd walk up to them and say, what event is bringing you in today? Not what are you looking for? What can we help you with? And like, not that. I was like, what event are you
Yeah,
looking
because they're
for?
not buying a suit to go to the mall, man. I mean, there's
Yeah,
obviously a reason.
exactly. Yeah, so I mean, walking through all of those kind of things, like you said, it's not like where a lot of our, obviously you and I did not end up in retail for the long term, but I mean, I mean, like the foundations are absolutely there, and say people, gosh, it's so basic. But I was even on a call the other day with somebody who was trying to sell me some stuff, and like they just wouldn't shut up. Like they just kept talking and talking and talking about all the cool stuff that they've got, right? And I'm sure their stuff is great, but like they don't know who I am or what I need or why I'm talking to them, right? So I mean, just shut up, come from curiosity. Like I saw another stat the other day that says, like in order for somebody to buy, typically we need to identify 4 pain points. In order to identify those 4 pain points, then we need to ask at least 12 questions, meaning that we need to be asking a lot of questions in order to find what our potential prospects are really needing, and then be willing to say like, hey, listen, I've got what I think you could need. It's going to be a little more expensive, but it's going to actually get you what you want. Like, do you want to do this, or do you want to give some things up? And some
Yeah,
people, like I said, they just
exactly.
don't show up. So like, just show up, shut up, and ask questions. Like that's really what it comes down to.
It does, man. And it's funny too, because you see people talk themselves out of sales because of that,
Yes,
right?
or
The
get
other
past the
problem,
close.
yeah, the other problem is assuming you really understand what that person needs without asking the question,
Yeah.
without asking the questions to identify what they really need. You may see somebody come in that's a younger dude that you probably could make the assumption that he's got his first job that's going to require him to wear a suit and tie to work
Hmm.
if he walks in, and you go in and say, "Oh man, first job or whatever else." No, actually, my father passed away, and I don't have a. Then you feel like an
Yeah.
absolute idiot.
Yeah.
And the reality is, I think every single one of us has had experiences in life where, in specifically in sales, where
Mm.
we stuck our foot in our mouth. You just don't do it a
Yeah.
second time. You learn from it. I can tell you, going back to the finish line again, I'll never forget this. I remember, and look, I realize now, having been formally diagnosed, that some of my foot and mouth moments are due to my ADHD because
Mm.
I end up saying things before my brain processes them. I mean, that's one of the side effects is you just blurt things out and you end up
Yeah.
talking over people. So I have to consciously do my best to not do that. But I had an older guy come in one time and he was looking at like starter. This is before starter was sold in Walmart. It was like that's
Okay.
back when starter jackets. You might be too young for this, man, but starter jackets were all the craze, right? Everybody had a Charlotte Hornets starter jacket. Nobody, even knew where Charlotte was, but they liked the colors and they liked the logo. This guy comes in and he's looking at these starter basketball shorts that were probably knee length. And when I tell you it was an older dude, he was probably in his mid 60s, early 70s.
Mm.
And he's like, "Hey, do you have these in a large?" And before I even could think about it, I was like, "Actually, why don't I show you over here? We got stuff that's more your speed on this rack." And I'm like, he goes, "More my speed? What do you mean by that? I like these." And oh God, why, what did I just say? What did I do? Even worse, man, like again, the ADHD, if I don't have it on lockdown, it can come back and bite me. I was on a plane probably, it was a year and a half ago, and there was a big dude next to me, like
Mm.
seatbelt extender dude next to me. And I'm not a small guy, man. I mean, I'm 6'4" and I weigh a good chunk of change myself. I'm at this point not obese, thankfully. I'm maybe a hair overweight, but I've lost a bunch and I'm proud of it. But this guy's next to me and we pull into the gate and he like takes the seatbelt extender off and he starts folding it up and it's got its own case. And I'm like, and I, just conversation, like, oh man, do you travel with that? And he said, yeah. He said, it's mine. He goes, $15 on Amazon. I'm like, no kidding, man. That's a hell of a lot cheaper than a gym membership. And there's like this awkward silence. I'm just kidding, man. Look at me. Do I
Yeah,
look
like,
like, I was quick enough on my feet to back it up. But I mean, that's the other thing. You have to, in outside sales, the thing that I think I appreciate more about being able to be outside is, number one, we get to control who we have as clients and prospects.
yeah,
It's not,
yep.
we're not captive to people who are walking in,
Mm,
unless, to the point I made earlier, you're in route sales and you're given a route and those are the people you have to deal with. But I get to pick and choose. The second thing is I can be prepared specifically for that
mhm,
person. I know the questions I want to ask. I can research what I need to research about the company, the individual I'm meeting with, and I can formulate my questions around those things so that they're impactful questions when I get in and have the conversation.
mhm.
And the third thing is I get to pick and choose whether or not I walk away after the first meeting. If
Yeah,
it's not going to be an ideal prospect for me, we can agree not to do business with each other and we'll probably both be fine as a result of that. But when you're in inside sales, specifically retail, you're captive to who walks in. You're never prepared for what they may ask you. You can have a pretty good idea based on experience, but you don't know exactly what's going to come out of somebody's mouth. Not saying it
mhm.
doesn't happen in outside sales too, but you can kind of prepare for it. And the third thing is you don't have a choice. Your job's to sell, period. You're getting
Yes.
paid by the hour. I don't care if you like the person or not. I don't care, if you whatever, we expect you to sell shoes. We expect you to do this because that's what we're paying you to do.
Mhm.
And you don't get to pick and choose. You could pick and choose to leave that company and go to another one, but you're going to be dealing with the same thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think really what it comes down to, because I mean, I had similar experiences when I was in retail where, I mean, like the guy that was coming in to drop, 5 to 10 grand on me was the guy that was probably walking in on sweatpants, right? Like he wasn't the guy wearing like the fancy suit or whatever else. So just never take anything for granted. Like just, like ask your questions, try not to make assumptions as much as possible. And just again, be really, really curious because that's really where you're going to find how you're going to be able to help people the best.
Absolutely. So as we start to wrap up, why don't you talk a little bit about your program and where people can find out more about you? And you had mentioned you had a website that's got some resources on it. This is your chance, man. Let them have it.
Appreciate it. So, again, probably the easiest way to find me is on my website, as you mentioned. It's just jacobhickscoach.com. You can find me on there. Feel free to reach out, drop me an email. So I love hearing from folks. Otherwise, I'm on LinkedIn, all the social media. If you're looking for a little more specific resources, I do have what I call my growth hub. It's a big block on my website where I've got a lot of free resources that are folks that if they're just getting started in sales or if they've been in sales for a while or if they're looking for some new and innovative things to try. There's a lot of good resources on there for you as well. I also have actually my own podcast that launched recently called my Purpose Driven Progress. So you can find me on there as well.
Awesome. What did we miss, man? Anything you wanted to cover that we haven't?
I don't think so. I mean, we really kind of ran the gambit today. I love it.
I just sent you a connection request on LinkedIn without a note. I never do that, but we're
All
talking
right.
right now, so I'm letting you know that I did it. Typically, man, when I reach out to somebody, I'm a big fan of like the video invite
Yeah.
or even using the audio message on the LinkedIn app. It's actually a really good way for you to differentiate yourself. But since we're already talking here, I took the easy way out and clicked 2 buttons less than I needed to. So
I'll let it slide.
all right, I appreciate it. Well, listen, man, thank you so much for coming on. I really, really enjoyed the conversation. I thank you for taking time out of your day to join me. And I know, if nothing else, that the audience here is going to definitely get some nuggets. And they always like it when you tell war stories from, old sales jobs or whatever else. I would encourage all of you to check out Jacob's website and use some of the resources that he has. And if you're looking for a fresh perspective, something other than the worn out insurance, sales processes and all of that stuff, give him a shout, see what he can do for you that you might not be getting where you're at. Because one thing I do know is if you don't have somebody from the outside of your agency helping you, the chances of you getting help inside are slim and none. It just doesn't exist. So with that being said, we'll catch you guys next time. See ya.